The journey toward truth begins with the complete destruction of everything we naively assume to be real. Welcome to my philosophy channel. We live in a world built on absolute illusions, where every certainty we cling to might just be a carefully constructed mirage. You wake up every morning believing the ground beneath your feet is solid, yet you never question the origin of that belief. What if everything you have ever known is fundamentally flawed? Chapter 1. The Illusion of Certainty and the Necessity of Total Ruin. Look at the screen in front of you and tell me how you know it truly exists. Your eyes capture light, your brain processes signals, and you assume reality matches your perception. But how often have your senses deceived you in the middle of a vivid dream? You felt the wind, you saw the colors, and you believed it completely until you woke up. We carry this blind faith into every interaction, trusting the flesh and bone we touch, the voices we hear, and the memories we hoard. Yet this unwavering confidence is nothing but a psychological coping mechanism designed to shield us from the abyss of the unknown. To actually question the fabric of reality requires a level of intellectual courage that most human beings shrink away from. In our modern age of endless information and digital echo chambers, this crisis of reality has only deepened. We consume thousands of images and narratives daily, accepting them as fact simply because they appear before our eyes. We have become addicted to the comfort of false certainty, forgetting that the most dangerous prison is the one built from unquestioned assumptions and algorithmic manipulations. We are drowning in a sea of fabricated truths, anchoring our identities to fleeting social media validations and second-hand opinions. The mind becomes saturated with the clutter of society, leaving no room for the purity of absolute rational interrogation. We mistake the volume of information for the depth of knowledge, continuously piling sand upon sand while hoping to build a fortress of unshakable wisdom. Imagine stripping away every single belief you hold about yourself and the universe around you. The psychological terror of total deconstruction is paralyzing, which is why most of humanity spends their entire lives avoiding it. We wrap ourselves in the warm blanket of habit, fearing the cold vacuum that remains when the familiar world suddenly evaporates into pure absolute doubt. This is not merely an academic exercise, but a brutal confrontation with our deepest existential vulnerabilities. To doubt everything means surrendering the very ego that keeps you functioning in daily life. It means looking at your loved ones, your career, and your own reflection, and entertaining the haunting possibility that they are all elaborate phantoms designed to keep you complacent in the dark. Over 400 years ago, one thinker decided to step willingly into that terrifying void of absolute uncertainty. René Descartes chose to dismantle his entire intellectual universe, treating every conceivable concept as a potential lie. He refused to build his philosophy on the shaky foundation of sensory experience, demanding a bedrock of truth that could survive the most extreme skepticism. He did not seek to tweak or repair the broken system of human knowledge, but to level it to the ground. Using the metaphor of a basket of apples, he argued that one rotten fruit will inevitably corrupt the rest. The only rational response is to empty the entire basket, discarding every single belief, until only those that prove absolutely indestructible remain behind. This process of methodical skepticism is a violent act of self-emancipation from the tyranny of the unexamined life. It requires you to stand alone, in the freezing wind of pure thought, stripped of every comforting delusion you have ever known. You must become the architect of your own annihilation before you can ever hope to become the author of your own truth. Think about the tremendous weight of history and tradition that presses down upon your mind since the day you were born. Society programs you with a matrix of prepackaged answers, dictating what is good, what is real, and what is possible. We inherit the blind spots of our ancestors, perpetuating a cycle of intellectual laziness because challenging the herd is deeply isolating and psychologically exhausting. Descartes recognized that this generational inheritance was fundamentally contaminated by human error and senseless superstition. He saw that the greatest minds of his time were arguing over details, while the very foundation of their reality was sinking in mud. To break free from this inherited madness, he realized he must retreat into total solitude, severing all ties with external opinions and historical dogma. Consider the physical sensation of isolation required for such a radical undertaking. You must lock yourself in a metaphorical room, sitting quietly next to a burning fire, while the outside world ceases to matter. In that deep silence, the mind turns back upon itself, stripping away the layers of conditioning, much like peeling the skin from a living entity. The pain of this process arises because our beliefs are not just abstract ideas. They are the very scaffolding of our identity. When you question the existence of the world, you are simultaneously questioning the value of your entire life lived within it. Every memory you cherish, every trauma you have carried, suddenly hovers in a liminal space between profound significance and absolute meaninglessness. Yet, within this terrifying disintegration lies the ultimate promise of human freedom. If you can survive the collapse of everything you thought you knew, you are no longer a victim of circumstance or biological programming. You elevate yourself from a passive observer of phantoms into an active seeker of pure light, willing to trade the comfort of the cave for the harsh radiance of truth. To embark on this path is to declare war on your own ignorance and the comforting lies you tell yourself daily. It demands a relentless interrogation of the mind, where no assumption is safe and no habit is sacred. We are seeking the undeniable core of existence, a mathematical precision applied to the messy, chaotic realm of human consciousness and lived experience. We must cultivate a state of mind that is utterly ruthless in its demand for absolute certainty. The world will tell you to compromise, to accept the evidence of your eyes and the warmth of the sun as sufficient proof of reality. But philosophy requires us to push beyond sufficiency, driving our intellect into the very extremes of what can be comprehended and verified. Before we can talk about the mind, the body, or the divine architect of reality, we must first sit in the dark. We must become intimately acquainted with the shadows of doubt, allowing them to swallow our assumptions entirely. Only when the darkness is total can then we begin to search for that one imperishable spark of absolute light. When every single illusion has been burned away in the furnace of rational skepticism, what unshakable truth remains standing in the empty ruins? Chapter 2. The betrayal of the senses and the dreamer's dilemma, the very tools we rely upon to navigate physical reality, are the exact instruments of our profound deception. Consider for a moment the absolute trust you place in your own eyes. You navigate busy streets, read complex texts, and recognize the faces of those you love, all based on fleeting patterns of light. Yet, this visual architecture is shockingly fragile. We have all witnessed a straight stick submerged in water suddenly appear broken, or a distant square tower masquerading as a perfect cylinder against the horizon. These microscopic betrayals should serve as terrifying warning signs for our intellect. If a witness in a trial is caught lying about a crucial detail, no rational judge would ever trust their testimony again. Why then do we grant endless amnesty to our senses? We forgive their distortions because acknowledging their fundamental inaccuracy would demand that we relinquish our grip on the only world we feel we understand. Our psychological dependence on sensory input binds us to a state of perpetual vulnerability. We mistake familiarity for truth, assuming that because we feel the wind every day, the wind must assuredly exist. But Descartes demands that we elevate our standard of evidence. If the senses are capable of producing false information even once, they must be categorically discarded as the foundational bedrock for any serious pursuit of absolute knowledge. This brings us to the most haunting psychological territory of all, the realm of dreams. Every night, when you surrender to sleep, your brain effortlessly constructions elaborate three-dimensional realities. You run from terrifying monsters, feel the frigid bite of winter, and experience heartbreak so profound it leaves you gasping for air. Within the confines of that slumber, the illusion is so total that you never once question its legitimacy. Think deeply about the implications of this nightly hallucination. If your mind can render a fictional world so flawlessly that it fools your entire nervous system, by what arrogant metric do you judge this current waking moment to be authentic? There is absolutely no conclusive neurological or philosophical test that can definitively prove you are not currently sitting in a darkened room, deeply comatose and dreaming this exact scenario. In the modern era, we build digital metaverse environments and wear immersive virtual reality headsets, deliberately seeking out artificial sensory experiences. We marvel at how easily the brain is tricked by high-resolution pixels and haptic feedback. Yet, we arrogantly assume our biological reality is immune to similar deception. We forget that our consciousness is locked inside a pitch-black skull, relying entirely on second-hand electrical signals. The dreamer's dilemma is not just a clever thought experiment. It is a devastating indictment of human confidence. It strips away the arrogance of the waking mind, forcing us to confront the disturbing fluidity of what we call existence. If the subconscious can build entire cities while the physical body lies paralyzed in bed, then everything you currently see, hear, and touch might simply be the elaborate fiction of a slumbering mind. When the boundary between the waking world and the phantom realm dissolves, we are left adrift in an ocean of our own fabricated perceptions. Chapter 3. The Evil Demon and the Paralyzing Terror of Absolute Deception. To push doubt to its absolute limit requires confronting the horrifying possibility of a universe governed by pure malice. Imagine a being of infinite power dedicated entirely to the singular goal of manipulating your mind. This is not the benevolent creator described in ancient theologies, but a supreme architect of deception. Every thought you perceive, every emotion you feel, and every logical deduction you make could be a carefully engineered illusion designed by this malicious entity to keep you forever entombed in complete and utter ignorance. Descartes introduces this evil demon not as a literal religious belief, but as the ultimate psychological stress test for human reason. If we assume that mathematics and geometry are universal truths, we find a comforting certainty. We naturally believe that 2 plus 3 will always equal 5, regardless of whether we are dreaming or waking. Yet, could an omnipotent deceiver twist even these fundamental laws of logical architecture? Consider the paralyzing anxiety of realizing your own cognitive apparatus is compromised. When a computer virus corrupts a hard drive, the system can no longer trust its own internal diagnostics. The human intellect faces a similar total collapse when confronted with the demon. You cannot trust your memory because the deceiver could have implanted those nostalgic visions 5 seconds ago, creating a false history within a fabricated existence. We wrap ourselves in arrogance, assuming our brains perfectly reflect objective reality. Modern society amplifies this hubris through endless digital validation, where we blindly trust the algorithms, curating our news and shaping our desires. We laugh at the idea of a cosmic trickster, yet we willingly surrender our minds to corporate systems that artificially engineer our daily perceptions. We are already living within a mediated, highly manipulated matrix. To truly engage with radical doubt means existing in a state of freezing intellectual solitude. You must strip away the physical world, denying the existence of your own hands, eyes, and flesh. The sky, the earth, the colors you admire, and the sounds you cherish are demoted to hollow fantasies. The mind is left suspended in a terrifying void, stripped of every anchor it previously used to define itself. This deliberate self-destruction is the necessary price for seeking absolute truth. You are tearing down the rotted house of false assumptions, knowing the falling debris might crush your current identity. The resistance you feel defending perceptions is merely biological habit fighting against philosophical awakening. Until you can face the demon without flinching, you remain a prisoner chained within the dark cave of your own unexamined illusions. If an infinite deceiver controls every parameter of your perceived reality, what inextinguishable flame can even the most powerful demon never snuff out? Chapter 4. The Unbreakable Spark of the Cogito in the Void. In the deepest abyss of total deception, the very act of being deceived reveals an undeniable foundation of existence. Submerge your consciousness completely into an endless expanse of absolute darkness where gravity does not exist, and temperature has lost all meaning. You have surrendered your flesh, your cherished memories, and the entire architecture of the known universe to the omnipotent evil demon. Panic rises like a black tide, threatening to consume your last remaining shreds of sanity as the boundaries of reality irrevocably dissolve into pure emptiness. That malicious entity might be deliberately twisting every single thought inside your head to ensure your utter destruction. It carefully orchestrates a massive illusion, guaranteeing that every logical conclusion you reach is a fatal error, leaving you trapped forever in a labyrinth of lies. Every time you believe you have grasped the rope of truth, the demon secretly sneers and severs it completely from above. The psychological torture of this state lies in the complete evaporation of trust regarding your own internal diagnostics. You cannot rely on your past because the demon could have forged every memory you hold dear merely 5 seconds ago. Your nostalgia, your traumas, and your greatest loves hover in a liminal space, reduced to meaningless artificial code injected into your mind by an unseen oppressor. Yet within this suffocating intellectual despair, you must very slowly examine the core logic of this ultimate deception. In order for the demon to successfully execute this flawless manipulation, there must inherently be a conscious target actually experiencing the grand illusion. The act of lying absolutely requires an audience, an active mind receiving and processing the fabricated reality being spun around it with such malice. To be thoroughly tricked demands the unshakable and absolute presence of the entity being tricked. This insight strikes like an indestructible solar flare, instantly piercing through the crushing weight and infinite darkness of universal skepticism. Descartes realized, during his extreme mental agony, that he could doubt the sky above and negate his own blood and bone, but he could never doubt the act of doubting itself. This formidable epiphany does not rely on complex mathematical formulas or external validation to prove its worth. It arises as a raw, visceral encounter with the naked essence of your own undeniable awareness. The very attempt to conjure the thought that you do not exist immediately requires a thinker to formulate that false hypothesis. The denial itself manifests as the ultimate confirmation of your vivid reality. The phrase "I think, therefore I am" becomes the first impregnable fortress of human consciousness built within the cosmic wasteland. Whenever you madly attempt to deny your own existence within your mind, that very effort immediately constitutes ironclad proof that you are vibrantly alive. As long as you keep thinking, struggling, and suffering under deception, you must unavoidably be a real and ineradicable entity. Think deeply about how profoundly this solves the terror of the demon's labyrinth. The deceiver possesses infinite power to alter the scenery of your reality, changing the colors of the sky or the laws of physics. However, the demon absolutely lacks the power to make you nothing while you are consciously perceiving something. The observer remains utterly immune to the destruction of the observed world. Amidst the chaos of modern society, we habitually anchor our identities to fragile external objects and fleeting digital approvals. We outsource our souls to the material world, causing extreme panic when those external scaffolds collapse, leaving us feeling entirely erased from the earth. But this pure light of reason coldly and mercifully reminds us that our core identity relies on absolutely nothing outside our own internal theater. Consider the endless notifications, social media avatars, and algorithmic echo chambers that tell you who you are every single day. We have willingly blinded ourselves with information overload, mistaking the loud noise of the crowd for the genuine voice of the self. We depend on external validation so heavily that sitting alone in silence feels like a punishing form of psychological isolation and existential dread. First principles thinking requires us to slice through this culturally programmed delusion and reclaim our sovereignty. You must strip away your job title, your bank balance, and the reflections in the mirror to see what persists. When the artificial constructions of society fall away, you are not left empty. You are reunited with the radiant core of pure rational awareness that governs your inner cosmos. Your mind, that luminous point of consciousness, capable of asking questions and feeling terror, is an invincible sanctuary against the tides of time. It represents a faint yet eternal heartbeat of absolute rationality, echoing through the infinite vacuum of the deconstructed universe. You remain a thinking thing, a singularity of awareness that no algorithm, virtual reality, or demon can ever hope to extinguish in the dark. By embracing this radical solitude, you cease to be a passive victim fearing the collapse of the world. You transform into the active architect of a new foundation, building only upon that which survives the most ruthless interrogation. The paralyzing fear of uncertainty is transmuted into the unshakable courage necessary to search for absolute truth without compromise. When all the grand illusions of the material world have burned away, is that solitary internal observer the only true thing you have ever owned? Chapter 5. The Anatomy of the Thinking Thing and the Mind-Body Gulf. Having secured the indestructible foundation of pure consciousness, we must now confront the terrifying anatomy of this isolated observer. Throughout your entire life, You have naturally equated your ultimate identity with the physical flesh wrapped around your bones. You stare into the mirror every morning, assuming that the reflection staring back represents the total sum of your authentic self. This deep biological attachment serves as a comforting illusion, blinding you to the profound philosophical gulf separating your raw consciousness from your mechanical body. Descartes demands that we relentlessly sever this psychological bond between the observer and the physical vessel it temporarily inhabits. If the omnipotent demon can fabricate the entire material universe, then your hands, your heart, and your brain are nothing more than highly sophisticated hallucinations. You must mentally amputate your own limbs, stripping away every gram of physical weight until only the invisible core remains. What exactly is this entity that survives the total annihilation of physical reality? It possesses no spatial dimensions, holds no measurable mass, and occupies absolutely no physical space within the universe. You are reduced to a purely thinking thing, a ghostly spark of awareness, suspended in a terrifying void. Your essential nature is entirely divorced from the blood and tissue you once believed defined you. Consider the profound alienation of realizing your body is merely a biological machine following strict mathematical and mechanical laws. The mind functions as an ethereal pilot trapped inside a meandering flesh automaton, operating through an inexplicable connection. When your non-material will decides to raise a physical arm, a metaphysical miracle occurs, bridging the impossible chasm between pure thought and heavy material extension. Modern society exploits our desperate obsession with the physical form through endless consumption and ruthless digital filters. We endure starvation and surgery to sculpt these temporary avatars, begging for algorithmic validation to prove our worth. Yet beneath this hysterical worship of the flesh, the silent thinking thing remains utterly starved of meaning, buried alive under the heavy weight of unexamined materialistic idolatry. If humanity is nothing more than sophisticated biological hardware processing chemical algorithms, then freedom is a cruel joke. The radical separation of mind and body rescues our autonomy from the cold determinism of pure physics. Your consciousness operates outside the chain of physical causality, granting you the sovereign power to deny perceptions, interrogate assumptions, and seek unshakable truth beyond the mechanical world. When you finally realize your true self has never belonged to the physical universe, where will you anchor your soul? Chapter 6. The Infinite Concept Within the Finite Vessel. To escape the claustrophobic prison of the solitary mind, we must discover an idea that we ourselves could never have invented. Having secured the lonely fortress of the mind, we now face the terrifying prospect of eternal solipsism. You have proven that you exist as a thinking thing, but this victory remains deeply claustrophobic. You are trapped inside a pitch-black room with nothing but your own thoughts echoing endlessly. How can the human intellect ever escape this internal prison and safely reconnect with objective reality? To find an exit, Descartes relentlessly examines the internal inventory of his own consciousness. He sifts through various ideas, memories, and imagined landscapes. He realizes that most of these concepts, such as trees, animals, or other humans, could easily be fabricated by his own imagination. A finite mind is perfectly capable of inventing other finite things by simply recombining memories and sensory illusions acquired during waking life. Yet hidden deep within this mental architecture lies one specific concept that completely defies human fabrication. It is the idea of a supremely perfect, infinite being. Consider the heavy weight of this discovery. You are a deeply flawed, finite creature bound by time and ignorance. How could a severely limited entity spontaneously generate the crystal-clear concept of absolute, limitless perfection out of thin air? Logical precision dictates that a cause must contain at least as much reality as its effect. A cup of cold water cannot spontaneously boil without an external source of intense heat. Similarly, your highly imperfect consciousness lacks the sufficient creative power to author the blueprint for supreme perfection. The finite vessel simply cannot contain or synthesize the infinite concept without receiving it from an external source. This epiphany shatters the cold isolation of the evil demon. Descartes concludes that this singular idea of perfection must have been implanted directly into human consciousness by an actually perfect being. It operates like a hidden trademark stamped onto the soul by its divine architect. The very presence of this innate idea proves that you are not alone in the void. A supreme creator must objectively exist. We see this innate longing for perfection echoing through every aspect of modern human psychology. We ceaselessly chase flawless digital avatars, utopian ideologies, and impossible romantic standards. This unending dissatisfaction stems from that original divine imprint. We ache for a limitless perfection that we intuitively understand but can never actually achieve within our decaying biological vessels. Our psychological restlessness is the ultimate proof of our higher origin. If your deeply flawed mind possesses the precise blueprint for absolute perfection, who originally placed that infinite architecture inside your fragile consciousness? Chapter 7. Reconstructing Reality Through Rational Deduction. With the anchor of a perfect creator securely established, the paralyzed intellect can finally begin to rebuild the shattered universe. For an eternity, we have wandered through the cold wasteland of absolute doubt, chased by the shadows of our own shattered beliefs. The malicious demon kept us paralyzed in a state of constant intellectual terror, forcing us to view every sensory experience as a deadly trap. But now, a profound shift occurs within the internal theater. The suffocating darkness begins to fracture under the weight of infinite perfection. If we truly comprehend the nature of this infinite concept sewn into our minds, we must radically reassess the origin of our reality. A being of absolute, limitless perfection cannot harbor malice, because the desire to deceive inherently stems from weakness, fear, or lack. Deception is a flaw, a desperate tactic employed by finite creatures struggling for survival. Therefore, the omnipotent architect cannot possibly be a cosmic liar. This logical realization acts as a violent exorcism of the mind, driving out the phantom menace that plagued our deepest nightmares. The evil demon evaporates into nothingness, replaced by a benevolent foundation that guarantees the fundamental reliability of our cognitive faculties. You are no longer an abandoned orphan floating in a void of meaningless deception. You are the deliberate creation of a mind-seeking truth, not pointless suffering. However, this guarantee does not mean you will never make mistakes or fall victim to ignorance ever again. The flawless Creator did not bestow upon us omniscience, but rather the specific capacity to discern truth through rigorous rational effort. When you use your intellect correctly, stripping away emotion and examining ideas with absolute clarity and distinctness, you cannot be led astray. Reason becomes your unbreakable internal compass. Notice how we are still not rushing to trust our eyes, ears, or flesh just yet. The sensations of heat, color, and sound remain highly subjective and prone to constant biological fluctuation. They are messy, unpredictable signals that vary wildly from person to person. To build a true science of reality, we must discard these vague perceptions and look for a language written in absolute, unchanging universal stone. That universal stone is the cold, beautiful architecture of pure mathematics and unforgiving geometry. Before the doubt started, you believed that 2 combined with 3 yielded 5, and that a triangle possessed 3 corners. Now, under the protection of the perfect architect, you can safely bring these concepts back into the light. Numbers do not lie, and angles do not shift simply because you close your eyes. Armed with this mathematical blueprint, we can finally look back outward towards the physical universe we once destroyed. We reconstruct matter not as a swirling soup of mysterious occult qualities or magical essences, but as pure geometrical extension in space. The world transforms before our mind, shifting from a terrifying labyrinth of unpredictable spirits into a magnificent, comprehensible clockwork mechanism governed by strict laws of predictable motion. Consider what this means for that physical vessel you carry around every single day. Your flesh, your blood, and your beating heart are stripped of their sacred mystery and demoted to intricate hydraulic pumps and levers. You can view the human body through the detached lens of an engineer, examining a broken engine. This radical demystification lays the unshakable groundwork for the entire field of modern medical science. This is the exact moment. The modern scientific revolution is birthed from the womb of philosophical despair. Humanity stops begging the heavens for magical interventions and starts calculating the trajectories of falling objects. We replace superstitious rituals with microscopes and telescopes, confident that the universe is a rational puzzle waiting to be solved. Descartes hands us the metaphorical keys to master and manipulate the wild forces of nature. Observe how a simple tree, reverting back to a geometric concept, entirely changes our relationship with nature. We cease projecting our own human emotions onto the bark and leaves, recognizing that the wood does not feel sadness, nor does the wind sing. The world is silenced, stripped of its poetic mythology, leaving behind a stark, mathematical canvas where human consciousness remains the only true source of deep significance. Yet look at how carelessly modern society wields this monumental power inherited from the fires of radical doubt. We use sophisticated quantum physics and geometrical algorithms to engineer digital ecosystems that distract us with meaningless entertainment. We rebuilt the universe so successfully that we became arrogant, forgetting the terrifying intellectual solitude required to find truth in the first place. We worship the machines but neglect the rational soul. We scroll blindly through endless feeds, consuming data without applying that vital clarity and distinctness Descartes demanded. We have willingly surrendered our cognitive compass back to the modern equivalents of the evil demon, allowing corporate algorithms to dictate our reality, our fears, and our desires. We accept emotional manipulation as objective truth, simply because it appears on a glowing screen tailored specifically to our deepest psychological weaknesses. To reclaim our humanity, we must constantly replicate this painful process of tearing down the false matrix. Whenever a headline enrages you or a trend demands your conformity, you must pause and demand geometrical proof. Slice through the noise with the surgical blade of unforgiving logic. Do not accept the murky shadows of herd mentality. When you possess the internal equipment to perceive reality in absolute daylight, in this glorious mechanical universe, your internal light becomes the ultimate anchor point for all potential meaning. You are not merely a passenger, drifting along the currents of fate, but a sovereign investigator equipped with the divine tools to master your environment. The fear of the unknown melts into the quiet confidence of the observer who knows how to navigate the darkness, using only the torch of absolute logic. Having resurrected the entire material universe, from the ashes of absolute skepticism through the sheer power of mathematical deduction, how will you ever again allow the fragile illusions of daily life to dictate the boundaries of your reality? Chapter 8: The Modern Echoes of Radical Doubt in the Digital Age. The enduring legacy of radical skepticism offers our only genuine salvation from the artificial matrices of the modern digital era. 400 years after a solitary thinker sat beside a warm stove divesting himself of every delusion, we find ourselves trapped inside a vastly more sophisticated prison. The omnipotent evil demon has manifested physically through the glowing screens and relentless algorithms that command our constant attention. We have voluntarily surrendered our precious rational autonomy to silent machines designed specifically to exploit our deepest biological flaws. Every time you scroll through an endless feed of curated outrage and fabricated perfection, you are actively participating in the complete destruction of objective truth. The senses are continually overwhelmed by high-definition mirages that blur the crucial boundary between authentic experience and carefully engineered manipulation. We confuse the viral popularity of an idea with its underlying factual integrity, trading unshakable certainty for the cheap comfort of the herd. Our collective addiction to constant digital validation has severely eroded the intense psychological fortitude required to perform methodical skepticism. It takes immense courage to step away from the deafening noise of the global echo chamber and sit quietly within the empty theater of your own mind. We flee from the paralyzing terror of intellectual isolation because modern society incorrectly equates solitude with utter existential failure and social death. Yet the indestructible flame of the thinking thing remains buried beneath the endless avalanche of senseless data we consume every single day. Whenever you experience that sudden nausea of disconnection, that creeping suspicion that the societal matrix is inherently hollow, you are feeling the ancient call of philosophy. Your consciousness is desperately trying to pierce through the synthetic hallucination and reclaim its absolute sovereign territory against the darkness. You possess the exact same revolutionary architectural tools that rebuilt the ruined universe from the absolute ashes of infinite doubt. You must wield the cold blade of rational deduction against every media narrative, every digital persona, and every manipulative emotion pushed upon your mind. Refuse to grant your assent to anything that cannot withstand the brutal scrutiny of your highest and most unforgiving logical interrogation. We elevate ourselves above the mere biological machinery of the animal kingdom exclusively through this glorious capacity for relentless self-examination. To philosophize is not to read dusty volumes, but to continuously smash the idols of falsehood until your mind stands naked before the absolute core of being. You master the universe only after you have first mastered the tremendous fear of having absolutely nothing left to trust. If this descent into the abyss of total doubt has sparked a fire within your intellect, please subscribe to the channel and like this video. Your engagement allows us to continue exploring the most dangerous and liberating ideas ever conceived by human consciousness. Join us next time as we tear down yet another fragile construct holding humanity captive inside the unexamined life. If the machine of society were unplugged tomorrow and every external validation disappeared forever, who exactly is the entity that remains standing in the silence?